Now, I have many options that I can do with color to get the colors technically perfect. I could go in and I could make very selective range masks for those colors by going into select and going into color range and making range masks. Or I can do something called the selective color adjustment, which is one of my favorite adjustments. What this selective color adjustment does is right now we're operating in the reds. This is saying, okay, you are in the reds. This is the cyan that is available in the color red. And within cyan, we have cyan. By increasing, we get more cyan in the reds, or we get more red in the reds by taking cyan out. Keep tracking. We're still in reds. Do you want more magenta in the reds, or do you want more green in the reds? Keep tracking. We're in the reds. Do you want more yellow in the reds or more blue in the reds? And do you want them to be darker or lighter? So that's just for the color red. Now imagine all of these with every color that I have here. So I do have red present in this image. One of the best ways to figure that out is to go to the blacks first. You see that? As I move that back and forth like a crazy man. I'll go a little bit slower. There we go. It makes those reds specifically. I'll zoom in for you so you can see it a little bit better. Up here, makes those reds more rich and thick, and it makes them brighter. That's because I'm working with the black slider. If we start working with, say, the cyan slider, if I include, let's just zoom into there because that was a really great way to see that. If I include more cyan, it's going to taper off the amount of red that's there. Why is that happening? It's not turning cyan. Why is it not turning cyan? Because what's happening is I'm allowing the cyan that's available in that color red to get more cyan in it. So it's never going to get to its max potency of cyan because technically what's making that red is the absence of cyan. Okay? It's like, is darkness dark or is it just the absence of light? That's what's happening here, is that when we add that much cyan to it, we're just tapering off the amount of red that can be available in there. It's like mixing that color a little bit, taking some of its complement out to allow it to become more red. If we take its complement out, it now becomes more red. We're now saying, hey, red, that cyan that was holding you back, we're pulling it out. So now you can be a more potent red. And I'll do this with all the colors. It might sound crazy, but I'm going to compare this to Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw because that's typically where people do this type of workflow. Go into that HSL document, that little pane in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, and what do you get? You get the hue, which is the color of the color, the saturation, which is the potency of that color, and the lightness, which is how much value is present or how much black and white is present. Anywhere does it say how much more cyan do you want in that color red? No. That might be considered hue, but when you move that hue, it's physically taking that color red and moving it around the color wheel. And it only does it in 30-degree increments because there's that governor in Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom that doesn't want you to do something really bad. So it only goes in 30-degree increments. So here we're not saying that we're adjusting the hue by moving you around the color wheel. We're adjusting the hue by removing the amount of color or adding the color into that we want. So in those reds, if I want them to be a little bit more yellow, just boost up that yellow. I don't want to add blue to it because now I'm getting like this hyper nasty, bad HDR red thing going on there, okay? I know bad HDR, I did it for years. Trust me. So we'll just go ahead and zoom out and see what we got here. Now with that much red present there, it's probably too much. So I'll bring that down a little bit to about right there. But the two colors I want to target the most here are going to be in the yellows and the greens because there is a separation between yellow and green here. And quite frankly, when you're looking at green grass in your photographs, you're actually looking at more of the presence of yellow than you are green. So if you ever go to the green adjustment, you're like, why isn't my grass changing? Well, it's because there's not a whole lot of green in there. There's not a whole lot of green data typically in our photographs unless we do something wrong. Then we really start to see it. It looks like circus vomit green. It's really bad. Bad visual, sorry. But late afternoon, wake up. So if we go into the yellows, we can make the yellows more yellow, or we can add some blue to them to taper off the potency of that yellow. We can come into the cyan, maybe make that yellow a little bit more of that Olympic Park cyan, yellow or greenish color that you see. Now, I've experienced this. I've been there. I know for a fact that my camera cannot show me the green that I saw in Olympic National Park. I know it can't, because when I took this picture and I looked at it in Adobe Camera Raw, I was like, what? Dude, really? Like, that's not what I saw. I saw this really nice, like, it was crazy. Like the amount of, it's so green you can feel it. So I want you to feel that too. So how do I do that? Well, I need to go into my yellows and add a little bit of cyan to it. I might even need to add a little bit. If I add too much green to it, it's going to look like that, like, ah, don't do that, okay? Don't do that. There's literal and there's, hinting. This is literally saying this is green, and it doesn't make for a good photograph. So you just, a little bit of green in there, maybe a little bit more of that blue in there to taper that off and add a little bit more of that cyan to get that color. If at any time you're working with saturation and you notice that your color is as robust as you want it to be, but you want to taper it down, just add a little bit of black to it. Because what that will do is it will make it a little bit more rich in tone inside that color. So even if you take a saturation adjustment layer and you hike that bad boy up and it looks disgusting, I'll show you. If you take the luminance adjustment and you add a little bit of black to it, it can actually look pretty good because you're making that tone, you're getting that color at the right color that you want it to be. You just need to make it a little bit more rich. So going into the greens here, just go ahead and add a little bit of yellow to those greens. Looking good right there. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to show you that real quick. If we go to the hue saturation adjustment layer and we slam that saturation up, it does not look good, okay? But watch what happens when I go into the lightness, start giving it a little bit of darkness in there. Adding some value to that rich color. I would typically do this selectively. If I'm going to do that, I wouldn't just globally saturate everything. I would go in and say, okay, yellows, get a little bit more potent, but taper down a little bit, okay? I'm just going to delete that layer because I don't want that there. So technically speaking, this is what we came out of Adobe Camera Raw with. This is after our tone and color.